So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kevin Fitzpatrick, and I am the Director of Development here at VIEW, the Veterinary Initiative for Endangered Wildlife. And it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you all to the May installment of our Conservation Conversation series, which today is being held in conjunction with Give Big Gallatin Valley, which is a community-wide event that connects people with charities and causes that they care about. We'll have more information on Give Big over the course of the evening, but for those of you who don't know about VIEW, at VIEW, our mission is to protect endangered wildlife by tackling the health threats they face in their native habitats. And we are the only conservation organization focused solely on the urgent need to address health threats as part of a comprehensive strategy for protecting wildlife around the world. So these conversations then are VIEW's way of keeping people informed about our work, about what we're seeing and what we're learning, and about issues in the field of wildlife conservation related to the health and well-being of animal populations, and humans for that matter, as we'll hear about today. Today's focus then is One Health, and I believe the timeliness and the gravity of this topic cannot be overstated. We're very fortunate today that our presenter will be VIEW's co-founder, Dr. Gretchen Kaufman. Gretchen is a wildlife veterinarian, a One Health educator, and one of the foremost experts in her field. Gretchen has held positions including the Assistant Director for Global Health Education and Training at the Paul G. Allen School for Global Animal Health at Washington State University. And she served as the Director of the Tufts Center for Conservation Medicine at Tufts University, where she founded the Masters in Conservation Medicine program. And she retains adjunct faculty positions at both institutions. Gretchen is committed to promoting the inclusion of wildlife health in conservation efforts and to seek sustainable solutions to global health challenges through a One Health approach. She strongly defends the protection of biodiversity as key to the health of the planet, and she continues to pursue and support the practice of conservation medicine. And all of us here at VIEW, along with countless students, professionals, and animals throughout the world, have all benefited tremendously and continue to benefit from Gretchen's consummate dedication, her considerable wisdom, and her incomparable work ethic. We're grateful for her insight and really proud to have her joining us tonight. But just a quick reminder before Gretchen begins, we're going to ask that everyone remain on mute for the duration of the presentation. So, if your homes are inhabited by precocious children or loud pets or loud spouses, or your backgrounds are, I see some people nodding, or your backgrounds like mine are likely to be periodically infused with police sirens or noisy neighbors, we'll be none the wiser. But there will be a question and answer portion at the end. So if you have questions, please submit them via the chat function, and we'll be happy to answer as many as we possibly can. And please do ask questions. I'm sure Gretchen will be happy to address any that you have, and we'll welcome the opportunity to expound on the very crucial and important points that she's going to explore. We want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we don't expect the evening to take longer than an hour, okay? So all that said, I think we're ready to begin. Thank you all again for joining us. And Gretchen, please take it away.
Okay, I think we're all set. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. That was so flattering. I am so thrilled to be able to talk about this subject. It's something that's very important to me, and I am glad to be able to share it with all of you, some of whom are old friends, colleagues, some quite accomplished in One Health and conservation medicine, and then some of you who don't maybe know what this is all about. So I'm going to really explain very basically what One Health is and why it's very important, why we need it more now more than ever. Not too much on the pandemic, because I think we're all sick of that topic, but it's certainly relatable to that. So let's get going. And of course, this is where we have to start. What is One Health? The first caption there is really the foundation for what One Health is all about. It's that human, animal, and ecosystem health are interconnected and interdependent. Oh, wait, I need to, sorry. This is interfering, this picture. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. Sorry. This is the foundation, the interconnectedness and interdependence. And what this means is that those of us that work in One Health are committed to considering and taking into account the inputs and impacts of all three of these spheres, human, animal, and ecosystem health, in One Health work that we do. So this movement is really important in my mind toward acknowledging the interdependence and need to take care of the planet for our very own survival. The other points here I just want to make at the outset, because those of you who may have Googled One Health will come up with a lot of reference to infectious diseases. One Health is a lot more than about infectious diseases, just as your own health or health of others that you know has a lot more to do than infectious diseases. So we want to make sure that we broaden that view to include other health issues, especially health should include mental health and well-being. And right now we're trying to explore what well-being means with respect to animal and ecosystem health as well, and that being quite important. The other point, and really kind of the main point I want to make in this talk, is that everyone can participate in One Health. It's not really the purview of health professionals only. And we need everyone to sort of take a different look at how health works in our world in order to get to where we need to go. So this is a little graphic that I put together that really says it all to me anyway, using the river as a symbol, where river health is extremely important for everything from aquatic life in the river, terrestrial life, all the way down to everything downstream, including the ocean that it dumps into. So I think it's a good symbol. So how did we get here? Well, this is sort of the recent past, but actually still the present in some situations. Over the 20th century, amazing discoveries and advancements have occurred, obviously, in medicine and in science. And this, unfortunately, has fed the tendency towards specialization, which is largely technology driven, but also politically driven. And I think it's a lot of human behavior going on there. Unfortunately, these three circles here are traditionally have not really done a good job talking to each other. And what we're finding is that this is becoming a problem in the complicated world that we live in. Now we're trying to overcome that fragmentation towards a more holistic, integrated way of working together. So this is kind of what One Health is today. You'll see, those of you that do One Health, usually the circles are all the same size, and these are not. And that's because there has been over the last 20 years or so a disproportionate weight given to humans and the human benefits of One Health. Again, largely driven by available funding and the public perception that causes us to lag behind the idea of equity amongst the three domains. But what we're realizing is that animal and ecosystem health are critical to human health and must be considered more equitably with a longer term trajectory than we are comfortable taking sometimes. So this is maybe the dream of One Health tomorrow, where we do have complete integration and reasonably equitable consideration of ecosystem, animal, and human health. Perhaps also recognizing, my other phrase I like is that humans are just another animal, that we really need some humility here. Okay, so let's talk about some examples of where One Health really is important and will make a big difference. And I call these the 4 existential crises fundamental to One Health, but they're kind of the big 4 for me personally. Other people have different lists, but these 4 are really important. Certainly not the entire list, so there are many more issues. That's climate change, the biodiversity crisis, pollution crisis, and emerging pandemics, which we're living through right now. So we're going to put One Health in context by doing this. So let's first talk about climate change. Mostly everyone talks about the effects of climate change on humans, people living in coastal areas, people suffering droughts, crop losses, and whatnot. But what I want you to do is to think about all the animals and ecosystems that are also affected, which often don't get considered. Climate change is happening faster than evolution can adapt and is even driving some species to extinction. Climate change is rapidly contributing to shifts in disease distribution. So we have some major health effects, which we're experiencing right now, especially with vector-borne diseases that affect humans and animals and even plants. Example being the bark beetle plague, really, which is going on in our great northern forests today. The One Health perspective, I believe, will provide better long-term solutions for planetary health. So the biodiversity crisis, which some people call the 6th mass extinction on the planet, is really very serious and just as serious as climate change. And it's also interrelated to climate change. That is, there's a relationship. So what is biodiversity? Why is it important? Biodiversity is the tremendous variation and variety of life that exists on the planet, from genetic material to bacteria to plants and animals, including us, of course. And this mass extinction event is largely caused by human activity, as you can see, since 1900 in this graph. So why is it important for health? I like to think of biodiversity as our insurance policy for resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is our ability to adapt and survive change, climate change being one of those. Biodiversity gives life on Earth options. If we decrease biodiversity, we decrease options that give us a way through to the other side. So loss of biodiversity only leads to more loss and eventual extinction, which obviously is a disaster. This includes attacks from disease and options for better health and evolution towards a better life. This is a diagram that the UN put out. So One Health is very much on the international scene. And in fact, the UN is considering this one of the 8 targeted actions that are needed to restore biodiversity. So pollution. Pollution isn't that often talked about in One Health. And I think it's very, very important because, of course, everything that affects our health affects other living things as well, especially with respect to pollution. So we need to pay attention to this. We've all seen this kind of a picture showing the horrible plastic pollution in the oceans that affects marine animals and a lot of birds. They're found with ingested plastic in their gut. Microplastics, which is really horrifying to me. I don't know about you guys, but 90% of table salt brands have microplastic in it. Okay, so you're salting your food and ingesting plastic just through that action. Microplastics have been found in animal and even human organ tissue. Okay, it's already embedded in your body. And microplastics are floating in the air that we breathe. So that's pretty shocking. Another really big one are heavy metals, which we've known about for a long time, but have really grappled with getting a hold of. Years ago, we were concerned with mercury and acid rain and polluting lakes in the Northeast and the ocean and incorporating into some of the great fish that we like to eat. Of course, there's the Flint, Michigan lead crisis, which was really an eye-opener, I think, for the rest of the country, because most cities in the United States have problems with lead in their drinking water. Lead in water affects humans, affects brain development in children, and also the same in animals. Another conservation issue is, of course, with California condors. The primary reason that condors were going extinct was the ingestion of lead shot from discarded or abandoned carcasses, hunting carcasses. Okay, so we've made tremendous strides with recovering condors. It's really very exciting, but in fact, the lead shot is still present in the environment that caused the problem in the first place. So that's kind of scary. And then another example of pollution that affects everything are these bizarre chemicals that we've created in our spectacular ability to innovate that are ending up in the environment, ending up in bodies, causing cancer, chronic diseases, infertility, cardiovascular disease, inflammation. And then the hot one right now is called PFAS, which is in our drinking water. It's incorporated in our bodies and the environment and never breaks down. And these are products found in Teflon and Scotchgard and other fire retardant type chemicals. So now we get to talk a little bit about pandemics, because this is another big One Health issue that involves humans, animals, and the environment. So interesting to know, most emerging disease epidemics and pandemics in humans originate in non-human animals. This makes sense because really that's where the diversity is, okay? The rest of the animal kingdom, especially for novel agents we haven't been exposed to before. These diseases, however, are not the animal's fault, but are universally caused by human activities. Reflexive actions to remove the source of the new disease agents, that is, kill the wildlife, are grossly misguided, and these have been proposed. It's something that's really of great concern for those of us working in One Health, where we think One Health can provide better options. Of course, COVID-19 is the poster child, and the proposed theory of emergence is a great story where increased wildlife-human interaction, whether it be through wildlife trade, wildlife farming, wet markets, with highly stressed wildlife, and repeated sustained exposure to the coronavirus causes the organism to mutate, adapt, and jump into humans, capable of transmitting from person to person. And then this all sort of culminates in a big city like Wuhan, where it takes off as a pandemic. So what inspires new human epidemics, pandemics? Well, certainly there are many things, but research is now showing that drivers of disease emergence and creation of new pandemics are universally due to human activity. So that's sobering. Activities such as industrial farming of domestic animals, human development into wild areas, which create opportunity for exposure to novel agents, as in the case of COVID, deforestation, habitat destruction, and wildlife trade, legal and illegal. So those last three should ring some bells for some of you. These are the same human-directed causes of wildlife declines that have facilitated disease emergence. Okay, so let's take a breather here and think about this. It is a little depressing, but in fact, these things are caused by humans, but yes, this is bad, but it also means that we can do something about it. If we humans have the capacity to make such a mess, we should be able to fix it. That's kind of my hope. Okay, so some examples of One Health in action. There are many, and these are just a few thoughts, and I'm hoping maybe some other people can toss in a few of their own, since I know some of you are working in this area. But we have everything from One Health community clinics, where we have animal health and human health people together under one roof, especially in underserved and low-income areas. These are working great. There's a sustainable hospitals movement. There are many, many government programs that try to bring human, animal, and ecosystem health policy folks together. There are research institutes and grants that are really flourishing at universities worldwide. There are lots of international aid or programs from the UN, the EU, and USAID that are promoting One Health integration, and there are some educational initiatives as well. Recently, I've been involved with the One Health Commission trying to address such a change in public perception through One Health K-12 curriculum project to teach kids. So we're going outside of the professional sphere to get people to think more about this in their everyday lives, which is really what my thing is right now. So One Health and conservation. Well, for many years, conservation did not really include considerations for wildlife health. Historically, disease and periodic health threats were considered part of nature. But over time, we have learned that human impacts have indeed become serious threats to wildlife conservation beyond those of habitat loss and wildlife hunting or trade or poaching, to include many health threats that would not otherwise be part of a natural system. Conservation medicine is a One Health discipline that concentrates on these threats, with a special emphasis on health risks for threatened and endangered animals, sustaining biodiversity, and protecting ecosystems. VIEW is a conservation medicine organization, and we're focused on health of wildlife in their native habitats, as Kevin explained. We understand that this means working with people because they're the decision makers to manage wildlife landscapes that they depend on to support healthy populations. These efforts in turn will also protect human health. So we make this very obvious. Much of our work in Nepal involved One Health aspects, working with government agencies and local NGOs that manage wildlife to build capacity for wildlife disease surveillance, which was not going on at all. So basically they didn't really know, they didn't have the tools to evaluate the health of their wild populations and to understand disease that moves through wildlife, livestock, and people. So a couple of examples. We did a study, we did a study to look at threats to wild carnivores from domestic animals. In this case, we did surveys of dogs in the buffer zone around Chitwan National Park to see what diseases they might have that could threaten wild carnivores inside the park, including tigers. This has recently been published. I've done a considerable amount of work on tuberculosis in Nepal. TB is a great example of a disease shared by humans and domestic and wild animals. It's been around forever, but continues to change. TB is the #1 infectious killer of humans on the planet. So it's not COVID-19. It is a very big problem in people in Nepal. So here, this graphic here shows all the players in this TB game in Nepal, which include people, of course, people who give TB to elephants, believe it or not. That's called a reverse zoonosis. Elephants can share that disease then with wildlife that they interact with, such as rhino. The domestic animals, buffalo and cattle, also have TB, where it's not really controlled at all in them, and they can spread that disease to wildlife as well as to people. So we have a pretty much complete circle there. These things are happening in a shared environment, and of course in situations where wildlife habitat has been altered by humans, especially clearing for agriculture and that sort of thing. There's increasing evidence that the organism may actually persist in the environment itself. So it's even more than just those players. Nepal, wonderfully, has a strong and developing One Health community. They're very interested in it. They believe in it. They think that this will really help them deal with some of their problems. Over the years, we have participated and contributed to multiple One Health focused efforts in Nepal involving a broad range of stakeholders committed to addressing serious health issues that bridge that human, domestic, animal, and wildlife health. So our projects in the Mountain West that some of you may have heard about in the last conversation that we had, conservation conversation. have to do primarily at this time with moose and bison, and we are looking at human impacts on health of both of these species. Certainly, we're looking at moose mortality and the potential for climate change impacting moose mortality, determining detrimental health effects on moose that are being fed by humans with good intentions, but perhaps not the best outcomes, and determining threats to bison from domestic animals, that is cattle. So this brings me sort of to the end here, where I want to throw it out to you, and I want to make the argument that One Health belongs in your life. This is my new focus. So it's really fun to be able to talk to all of you today. Success of One Health thinking has to be larger than just health professionals. This is what I'm finding. It's moving rather slowly, and we are sort of in an urgent situation. And part of the problem is that the general public doesn't understand it or value it or even naturally fall to it. So we all need to change the way we think about the planet and our health, clearly, for us to have a reasonable future. So I want to throw it out to you. Thinking about humans, just another animal, and how every action in your life, how does your every action affect the short and long-term health of yourself, your family, your community, animals, and ecosystems. I've got a lot of suggestions here, and I'm sure you have a lot of suggestions, from personal choices to community choices, getting involved with your community, talking to people about One Health, supporting policies that encourage One Health or holistic thinking. And there are a couple of bills there that are active right now on the national scene. But getting other people to really explore this as a way forward. Also just wanted to mention, for those of you who feel like, well, I'm helpless and I can't really make a difference, and I know we all feel this right now, especially with the pandemic. I was very inspired last week with another Zoom event with the wonderful Jane Goodall, and she is all over the Act Locally, Think Globally moniker, really encouraging people to start making your impact locally first. And you'd be surprised if enough people do that, what kind of outcome we can have. So that is all I have for slides. Do we have some comments or input or suggestions or new ideas?
Yeah, I think we have some. Thank you, Gretchen. That was fantastic and very, very informative. So we'll move on to the Q&A portion. Remember, this is for everyone. If you have any questions, please submit them via the chat button on your screen. Although I think a few, as I said, have already come in. So Alex Carpenter, our community and outreach coordinator, will field those right now. And I guess we can begin with the Q&A portion.
Hello, everybody. So as you just said, please type away your questions. I am going to start with a couple that I have already. A couple of private ones came in. One of them being toward the beginning of your talk, Gretchen, you mentioned the high priority of humans versus animals in the environment. What do you think would better prioritize the other two?
Well, I think it's natural for people to do this, and it's certainly natural for society as a whole making decisions to prioritize people. And a lot of times I think it's because people have blinders on. They don't really even think to look at those other factors, to look at animals and the environment, or to think about the long-term impacts of the decisions that they're making. And so this is what we try to do in One Health. We want to get everyone at the table. So it has to be a concerted effort. It's not really going to come naturally. I think people naturally migrate to their own kind and their own interests. And unless we make a concerted effort and everyone tries to make sure we're thinking about these broader issues, it isn't going to happen by itself. It's not going to be even legislatable unless everybody's at the table. So that's what we try to do when we're in One Health. We try to get a human health person there. We try to get an ecologist or an environmental health person there to explore, well, what are the impacts of what we're talking about? So it takes an effort.
What are examples of behaviors that people do to inadvertently harm wildlife? In other words, even if people mean well, are there some bad habits that we can curb immediately?
Well, wow, that's kind of a big question. I think I had some suggestions there. All of those personal choice issues on the previous slide. Here we go. Reducing carbon footprint, avoiding plastic, eating less meat. We've heard these things, but they all have impacts on health down the line. And avoiding chemical additives, all these things we can do. Certainly, you know, when you see someone throw a can out the window of their car, you want them to stop. But a lot of these are personal choices, you know, especially with COVID now, all this stuff getting takeout food and everything comes in styrofoam. I mean, that doesn't have, you know, make a comment to the vendor that you don't want your food in styrofoam. You want them to make another choice. And sometimes it's like, oh, I never thought of that. Or it's a little more expensive, but it's probably worth it in the long run. So just consciously approaching that will help. And I can't overemphasize the education thing, working with children to get them to change their attitudes from the start. So when they grow up, they will naturally feel this way. That's where the change is really going to happen, in my opinion.
Thank you. Another one, okay, a couple that are coming in now. There are different ways of tri-aging endangered species and conservation efforts, such as EDGE and biodiverse hotspots. What methods do you think are the most promising for conservationists to focus on?
It depends on the situation. You know, every time you walk into a situation where there's a problem, a lot of times it's at those edges where there's livestock, human, wildlife interaction, and problems occur there, and emphasis is made there. But preserving whole landscapes, I mean, is very important too. And that interior, making sure that specifically for wildlife, that they have appropriate, clean, healthy environments to live in is important as well. So I don't think anything's more important than other things, other than really making sure that we're always asking those questions. So we don't leave something critical out. If we leave it out, we're going to make a mistake. Techniques, again, the One Health method really is the intersectoral or interdisciplinary collaboration where, and if you're in a community setting, some of you are community members, making sure, again, all these different stakeholders, we call them, which is a jargon term, but everybody that's involved with this issue, and not just the people, you know, immediately involved, but the broader community people involved are at the table to discuss it. You know, so it's not, so again, we don't make a mistake and leave something out. And our motivations and our impetus is really to go quickly and to think first and foremost of whether it's, you know, our own health or profit or whatever. We have to step back and think, well, what are the long-term impacts?
Another question came in mentioning community involvement is key. However, usually most of efforts are up-down, and that might seem as an imposition. Some think that in long-term bottom-up support, people-based, to involve policy making and financial support. Do you have some successful examples to share?
I guess I'm not quite clear on what you're looking for. I think it takes both. There's no question about it. It takes both. In some situations, it's very helpful to have the top down, set a framework that moves things faster. But frequently the folks at the top aren't necessarily listening. So then the bottoms up is really important to change the way people think, because it's at a whole different level, a whole different scale, a lot of personal interaction that's really important. So I think they're both important. Like I said, what I've been focusing on is K through 12 education most recently, to really get it in the minds of children when they're very young, that they should care about animals, they should care about what they're doing when they're stomping through the woods or whatever it is, and ask questions before harming something. What they're doing, throwing things into a stream, so that they think about that just naturally. But you're right in that, or whoever asked the question, I don't know if they have more to add. Community isn't the whole piece. None of these are the whole piece. It takes a big effort all the way through.
Another question. It says, does lifting wildlife health in the GYE help agriculture, animals, and humans?
Sure. So that, and that's a thing that I think View has made this argument many times, both Deborah and myself, is that, yeah, these conservation efforts, especially when you're pigeonholing specific species, it's good to work on habitat protection, et cetera, or stop poaching and all that sort of thing. But if the population that you're left with isn't healthy, that's not going to work. That's why we have the three legs of the stool. And if the population of wildlife isn't healthy, it's going to bleed over into livestock and people. TB is a great example of that happening. If you don't take care of the health, it depends on what the society values. In Nepal, a lot of sway was given to the fact that these are iconic animals, elephants and rhino, and it meant a lot to the tourism industry. So having healthy rhinos and elephants was important to maintain the tour. You could turn it into an economic initiative. But certainly if there's interaction between livestock and the GYE we're talking about and wildlife, it's important that both sides of the fence are healthy populations.
So another question, do you see the pandemic as an opportunity to raise awareness on the importance of One Health, and what are the barriers that prevent that from happening?
I think it's interesting. I'm glad that was brought up, because I think there have been lots of very positive discussions about this with the pandemic. A lot of great scientific papers have come out, and because the media is so into the pandemic, they're picking up on these things and they're publishing them in Scientific American and lots of other sort of BBC lay publications to explain why the pandemic emerged. Everyone wants to know. So they hear this story. They hear this story about bats and pangolins and animals that are abused in wildlife trade and whatnot, and they're hearing that. Back when the avian influenza thing happened in the 2000s, I think I alluded to this. One of the knee-jerk responses for avian influenza was to go out and kill wild birds. And imagine that. That's not so much the reflex anymore. I think we have made great progress on that. And I think that the pandemic, because it touches literally everybody, everybody's touched by this, that the story has been very positive towards what we need to do differently once we come out of this, in terms of land development, pressures on wild areas, wildlife trade, wet markets, all that sort of thing. Even wildlife farming is being denigrated now as maybe not a great idea. So I think it's been good, yes. But it's a lot of pain to learn that lesson.
The last question I think that we'll be receiving tonight asked that, do you see more pandemics like COVID that originate from wildlife enter human populations?
Absolutely. I was reading something yesterday that was like, oh, in the post-pandemic era. Now, I guess maybe they meant the current pandemic, post-current pandemic era. There is going to be no post-pandemic era. That's a silly notion. Of course, there's going to be more. There's going to be more. So what we can do better is we can prevent as much as we can, and we won't be able to prevent everything, but we can prevent as much as we can from what we've learned about how we deal with animals, how we take care of the planet, how we deal with wildlife as well as livestock, to minimize the opportunity for another pandemic to arise. But it will. I'm totally confident that it will happen again. But we really do have a lot of control over that if we do the right things. I believe that.
Okay, thank you for that, Gretchen. That was the last question. And thank you for the entirety of that presentation. That's so helpful and so important today. Before we call it a night, I would just like to mention one more time that Give Big Gallatin Valley is now officially underway. As I said before, Give Big is a 24-hour community-wide event that connects people with charities and causes that they care about in order to generate financial support for local organizations. With that in mind, I'd like to point out that the work we do at VIEW and the difference we make to wildlife in the area and throughout the world is only possible thanks to the generosity of friends like you. So if you're interested in participating in Give Big Gallatin Valley, please go to their website, givebiggv.org. The links are also in the chat, so you can just click on them. And there you'll be able to find out more information about supporting VIEW, as well as learn about this important community event. And should you choose to support us, I can assure you that your kindness and your compassion will really make a tremendous difference.
And there's a match, dollar for dollar.
There is a dollar for dollar match thanks to our board of directors, so that every gift that we receive will be doubled and will do twice as much good toward our mission. So that's our event for the evening. On behalf of everyone at VIEW, thank you for attending. Thank you for your interest in wildlife conservation. And thank you for helping spread awareness of the vital role that we all play in preserving and protecting this world that we share. Have a good night, everyone. And thank you again, Gretchen.
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you all. Hope you all
Thank you,
stay
Gretchen.
safe. Take care of yourselves.
Yeah.
Love to see you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.